In this noisy corner of Gravesend, Pocahontas' remains lie. Now, we don't know exactly where because the original church is burnt down and the records have been lost. How does she end up here, of all places? And more than that, why in 1923 did an American cause havoc in Gravesend when he literally exhumed the entire graveyard looking for her remains? I'm telling you all of that and more.
Let's start with names first off, okay? So Pocahontas is actually a nickname, it means playful one. Her birth name was Amanute and she had a private name which was Matuaka. Now, she was born in what we would now call Virginia. We think in the year 1596, although we are not 100% sure. And she is the daughter of the chieftain. Sometimes she's often called, even in the night when we get to the 1920s, you'll see her referred to as an Indian princess. And we know that Disney thinks of her as an Indian princess. But there's a lot of kind of Western ideals and concepts that put onto Pocahontas. Now, what is Disney and what is real? Now, I'm sure you've all seen the Disney film. There is a John Smith, and in the year 1607, John Smith is captured by Pocahontas' people. Now, we don't know 100% for sure, but it looks like she might have helped him escape, and she might have helped feed him and his people afterwards. What we do know is that after this period, Pocahontas is captured by the English, by the early Americans, and is used to, or supposed to be used to, exchange for hostages. Now, whilst being kept as a captive, it is in this period that Pocahontas both converts to Christianity and changes her name to Rebecca. Now, who has seen Pocahontas 2? We've now left Pocahontas 1, we're in Pocahontas 2, okay? So you remember John Rolfe? She eventually does meet him, they do get married, and they have a son called Thomas. Now, they are going to take the very long and perilous journey, perilous in those days, perilous I guess now in some cases, and they are going to go to London. And John Smith is already back in London in this period. He's a big fan of Pocahontas. He writes to the Queen and says you should treat her like a princess. And it looks like that is the case, that she is treated well in London. But of course, Pocahontas has no voice. We can never make any kind of proper suggestions about how Pocahontas feels because we only have this colonialist lens to view her story through. But what we do know is she comes to London, she is kind of touted about as, again, it's all, you cannot separate the Pocahontas story, even in death, we're going to get to this, even in death, this is a colonialist narrative, is that she's kind of touted about as, I guess, an example of a good Indigenous person. She has met colonialists, she has kind of fed them at her own expense, she has risked her life to save them, and she's been a very good girl, converted and married someone. And so she is taken to London to kind of exemplify this is what we can achieve in London effectively. In 1617, we know that the Rolfes are wanting to go back to America. They book passage on a ship. Sadly, both Rolfe and Thomas will make the journey, Pocahontas will not. We know that she gets sick on board the ship. She only makes it as far as Gravesend, and she either dies on board the ship and is removed at Gravesend, or she's taken off the ship at Gravesend and dies somewhere on land near Gravesend. What we do know is that she is buried with honours. She is buried as a gentleman's wife. She's buried under the chancel. We know that. We have the record of that. It says, March 21st, Rebecca Rolfe, wife of Thomas Rolfe Gent, a Virginian lady born, was buried in ye chancel. Now that's important that we know that she's buried under the chancel. This is a very common thing in those days. If you're a person of importance, you want to be somewhere of importance in the church, and the chancel is a great place to be buried. So we know where she is. But sadly, in 1727, the church burns down, and so too do all the records. Why is this a problem? Well, because we now don't know where the chancel is. So we know that there was a church at Gravesend. We know that she was under the chancel, but we don't know where the chancel is. Now, what do we know since Richard was discovered is that really great scholarship can find these great people. Now, the guys that are going to come along in our tale in a few minutes are going to completely destroy that, guys. You know, the Richard III case is an incredible piece of scholarship. They did the legwork and they actually found him. And we could have done exactly the same for Pocahontas and then had a discussion about where she should remain, where she should be buried. What happened in 1923 should not have happened. Let me tell you why. Now, here is where it gets messy. We have three men. The first dude that you need to know about is a guy called Edward Page Gaston. Now, he's from Chicago. He's an archaeologist. He's claiming at the time to be descended from Pocahontas, which kind of turns out not to be true. You will have a guy called W.P. Pycraft. He is from the British Museum. And you have a colleague of mine who I don't really want to take as a colleague because some of his beliefs are pretty eugenicist, a guy called Arthur Keith. And these three guys unite. What they decide is, probably off the back of kind of the sensationalism of discovering King Tutankhamun's tomb in such close proximity in terms of time, they decide that they want to go and look for Pocahontas's body. Now, Gaston's motivation is that he said she is an American princess. Obviously, there are very few of those, and she should rest in America. And now, you know, if any of you saw my Richard III video and the shorts and things, there was a lot of discussion on there about where Richard should rest. Should it be in Leicester, where he has obviously been buried for 500 years? Should it be in York, which is, you know, kind of his original haunt? Or should he be in Westminster, or even in Windsor with the other kings? Now, archaeological rules are that whenever a body is discovered, that they get buried in the nearest church to there, which is why Leicester won and managed to keep Richard rather than York or Westminster. So in terms of archaeological rules, usually you would have Pocahontas to remain where she is. She's been in Gravesend for a very long time. I actually don't have any kind of opposition to her having been repatriated to her own people. I think that's really important. That is not something that's going to happen now because of these, no offense to cowboys, but you know, in England we call them cowboys. What these cowboys did in the 1920s. Here's a quoting from the Daily Mirror. This is dated the 1st of June 1923. This is what I'm showing you. She could be any of those schools, guys. So, I mean, what's really interesting about this case is, if you saw my Henry video, the reason that is such a great video is that I have a first-hand account from the doctor who was there, Sir Henry Hawford. And this is very common with any kind of professional. Even hundreds of years ago, they went and did something and they wrote about it. That is the essence of scientific endeavor. You do something, you record it. I cannot find a first-hand account from any of these three guys. All I've got is newspaper cuttings. I cannot find any kind of discussion about what their plan of attack was, what they did and what they found. There's nothing, and it is weird. So I've got the evening paper, the Evening News, which said this is a meddling curiosity, a peeping sacrilege. This is what they're calling it at the time. Even in America, you might think that the Americans are, you know, really thrilled with the idea that Pocahontas might be being repatriated. This is, from what I can find, this is really not the case. This is, I'm going to read to you from the Dallas Morning News. This is the 23rd of July, 1923. And I show you this not because it's brilliant and accurate reporting, it's really not. There are a couple of things that they get wrong in here, which is really important for me in terms of how you consider this paper, because, you know, I never want to show you anything that's not true, but we have limited resources, so read this with caution. It does present inaccurate information, but what it does show you is how people felt about this expedition at the time. No, this ransacking of the graveyard, which is filling the people of Gravesend with horror and indignation and arousing a storm of protest all through England, is merely to satisfy the interest of Edward Gaston, an American archaeologist who happens to be a descendant of Pocahontas. I think that's been debunked since then. Early this year, he obtained permission from England's Home Secretary to begin his gruesome search. It looked like an easy matter, for tradition said that when Pocahontas died of smallpox, she was buried in the vaults underneath the parish church at Gravesend. We know that's wrong. Our records say she was buried under the chancel. As an aside from this, but part of the vaults that was supposed to hold the ashes of Pocahontas, again, we're not looking for ashes, we're looking for an actual skeleton, that was supposed to hold the ashes of Pocahontas, proved mysteriously empty, and then the search was continued in the churchyard outside. Well, they were always searching in the churchyard, guys, because there is a new church built there. We just don't know where the chancel was of the original church. Soon, the villagers of Gravesend were shocked to see a large force of men at work with picks and shovels in the burial place where so many of their ancestors rested, and which they have always held in such reverence. Now, we spare a thought for the people who have been burying, Grandad in the Gravesend church. Grandad is now, just been thrown. They've just taken his skull and no one's going to rebury him with the rest of his body. It's terrible. Under the direction of Mr. Gaston and his English associates, Dr. W.P. Pycraft, Assistant Keeper of Osteological Collections in the British Museum, and Sir Arthur Keith of the Royal College of Surgeons, the labourers were bringing to the surface great quantities of human bones. The skulls and other parts of the skeletons were heaped all over the cemetery for Mr. Gaston and his fellow scientists to sort over and measure. What particularly shocked the people of Gravesend was to see the excavators partaking of afternoon tea. I mean, how British, right? on a flat tombstone piled high at one end with bones. Meanwhile, the workmen with cigarettes in their mouths were hauling up more and more of the cemetery's contents, and photographers were busy making snapshots of the ghastly scene. So this is from the Dallas paper. They are not happy about this. The fact that the excavators have the decency to rebury with proper religious ceremony the bones they found of no interest to them has failed to check Gravesend's indignation. The blind rector on the parish church is being bitterly denounced because he permitted the excavations and also because he officiated at the reinterment of the bones. So they're reinterred, but we don't know how. Now, it's worth having a look at my colleague, I won't say friend, fellow MRCS, Sir Arthur Keefe, because he's going to be a controversial figure in this. There is, like I said, there is a really big vein of colonialism in this. We cannot leave this poor woman alone, even after death. And we've got two people who kind of think they're just going to look at the bones and see an Indigenous American. And there is a really big thread of kind of ethnic profiling here. Now, Arthur Keefe is Hunterian professor, that's like our king, guys. He's an anthropologist and an anatomist. So he is the kind of guy, he believes that humans originated from Europe, not from Africa. And he is a proponent of racial segregation, and he believes that intermarriage between races creates inferior progeny. He might also have been a fraudster. So when I was researching him, like, this is the kind of guy that's involved in this Pocahontas thing, guys. There's a famous case called the Piltdown Man, which basically they found the fossils of bones of what they were calling a missing link in terms of human evolution. And it was a complete fraud, and it took years and years to work this out. And he is one of the strongest kind of suspects for the creation of the Piltdown Man and the he was either a rubbish kind of anthropologist or he was involved in it, because he's involved in this and he either doesn't spot or perpetuates this idea that they found a missing link, guys. He's not a good dude. But he does help us find the sinoatrial node, which is part of the circuit that helps your heartbeat. So he has contributed in a positive way to medical science, but his racial views are not great. So when you think about what needs to kind of colour your view of this exhumation attempt, is that you've got Pycraft who just thinks they're going to pick Pocahontas up and look at her and be like, yes, she is from her skull, she's a Native American. And then we've got this guy, Arthur Keefe, who is, you know, clearly, you know, a eugenicist of the day. So I had this Pocahontas video ready to go. It was like ready to go. I usually have them loaded like a week in advance. And then it occurred to me when I was thinking about the content that I'd produced that, you know, Arthur Keefe had found some specimens and there was no record of what happened to those specimens afterwards. So Arthur Keefe, as I mentioned in the video, is a member of the Royal College of Surgeons, just like me. Now, there's no record of what happened to those specimens after. So I'm just kind of wondering, I'm sitting here and I'm wondering, is it possible that those specimens could still be at RCS? And obviously one of them was noted to be query Native American. Now, I thought to myself that we should probably, you know, just contact RCS and see if they have anything from this excavation at all. So I've done that just now, which is why we've got like the impromptu filming here. I think it's very unlikely, obviously, because what are the odds that, you know, someone like me could find something like this? But I wouldn't be surprised if I'm the first person that's asking the question. The only thing that really complicates this is that the RCS building, Royal College of Surgeons in London, was bombed really badly in the Blitz. So I have emailed them and we will wait and see what happens. The 3-day wait for answers there. It's frustrating. I need to know. Let me come to RCS and see. Call in RCS. See if they will put me through to someone in collections or specimens. This is the second time I've tried. It's ringing. It's ringing. It's ringing.
Welcome to the Royal College of Surgeons. The reception desk is open 8 o'clock till 3 o'clock, Monday to Friday.
It's 12 o'clock, I think. 12. It's before 1.
Department
On a Wednesday, so they should be answering.
Their telephone numbers are
So there's really no reverence here for Pocahontas, and there's no reverence for anyone in the graveyard either. Remember, most of these will have been kind of lower class people because they're just buried in the churchyard, and you've got, I don't know anything about Paige, but the other two certainly would have been kind of, you know, upper class British people, and they are just trashing this entire graveyard. And there is a note somewhere that they find 3 specimens, so 3 skulls that are, presumably the bones as well, we just don't know, that are of interest. Now, I kind of went down a wormhole with this because we've got the British Museum, we've got the Hunterian Museum involved here. Did they, seriously, do we expect that they just walked away? This is what's so interesting about this case, guys. I cannot find any information as to what happened. So they dug them up, fine, we get that. Did they just literally go, oh, we can't find her because all of these skulls look Caucasian, and they reburied everyone and went home? What would you do? Like, surely they took some specimens that were on the border just to be able to say to everyone that was involved, yeah, we found something, and then later it turned out not to be her. So I was like, well, is it possible that at the Hunterian or at the British Museum that they have the specimens in a box from some random 1923 exhumation? And I've combed the archives at the Hunterian. I've read basically every letter that Arthur Keefe ever wrote, and if you look through those archives, they're just really boring. Like, it's like someone writing to him saying thanks for dinner. Also looked through the archives at the British Museum. I can't find that they registered or logged any specimens from this exhumation. So what my worry was is, have they kind of exhumed Pocahontas and she's been in a box at the British Museum or at the Hunterian Museum for 100 years? I can't find that that's the case. So my assumption is that she was reburied, but not with the same reverence that in 1617, as we started at the beginning of the video, she was buried with reverence as a gentleman's wife for the status that she deserved. And she doesn't have that now. Presumably, under there, they've just got, you know, a mass of bones under there. So she doesn't rest in the way that she deserves. And we have to remember that the narrative of Pocahontas, it's a story we're all familiar with. This is not a legend that has risen through Indigenous peoples in America, and you've just got to be aware of it because it's so popular. This is a white colonialist story, not a Native American one. This is the story of a woman who does everything to support the invaders effectively, not her own people. And so that is why we, as you know, I obviously I'm English, these are my people who are kind of going and doing this. That is why we particularly love the story of Pocahontas, because she is, you know, she's doing everything that we want her to do. So we have to remember when we think about the story of Pocahontas, and we also have to remember that she was a real woman and she doesn't have any kind of voice. All the voices we have for Pocahontas are through other people who do not share her race, do not share her sex, and do not share her perspective. So on that note, I kind of want to finish on a different note. I want to tell you about a different lady because I wanted to put a spotlight on a Native American woman who kind of had risen through the ranks of their own community, and she very much achieved incredible things. So this is Wilma Mankiller, and she was named the first female chief of the Cherokee Nation in 1965. So she is a woman who has done things on her own terms, and so she was the first female chief of the Cherokee Nation in 1985. She wrote 2 books, she spearheaded loads of educational initiatives, she increased tribal membership and revenues by nearly 200%. She was an incredible woman, and she very much did things on her own terms, and we really don't know with Pocahontas what was on her terms and what wasn't. So I hope that you found this video quite incensing in terms of what these 3 guys went and did to Pocahontas in the 1920s. Just the idea that she was theirs to kind of interfere with, and, you know, ultimately to treat with such little reverence, you know. And I think everyone, whatever nation you are, should be cross that this was allowed to happen, and that, you know, fine, I'm completely happy with the idea that they excavated her with the intention to take her back to America, but those bodies should have been laid back where they found them so that they continued to rest in peace. And I can't find any evidence that was the case. So as always, I'm really glad to have you watching the video. Thank you so much. I can't wait to see you next week. Please do like and sub and put your notifications on, because it just helps more channels like mine. Let me know what you thought of these three guys. Like a 2.5 hour drive, guys, to get here. We're gonna have lunch and then we are gonna head straight home. So I hope you love this video and it was super worth it, because poor Ash has spent 6 hours, basically 6 hours driving me.